Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Political Excess. Few days remaining in this election. On election day, we'll try to do a live stream if everything goes as planned. But for this time, I've got the top 5 closest governors' races. I did the top 5 for the Senate the other day. This time, top 5 closest governors' elections. You might disagree with one or two of these. That's fine. I want to hear your top 5 below in the comments. But all 5 of these really could go either way at this point. But let's start with number 5. And for me, it's New Mexico. I went back and forth with a lot of different states. Some people might make the case for Arizona, Michigan, or New York, or even some wild cards like Rhode Island or Oklahoma. But I settled on New Mexico. And as we see here, the aggregate polling has Michelle Lujan Grisham up by 5.6 if you average out Real Clear Politics and 538. She's up 3.5 on Real Clear Politics alone. And I do think this race has narrowed up to the point where it's truly competitive. For a while, I thought Mark Ronchetti was just not going to be able to get it done. He did overperform in the Senate election a couple years ago. It just seemed like he wasn't really going to be able to get it down much more than mid-single digits. But at this point, it looks like it really could be low single digits, possibly an upset in the works. We go down here and take a look at the individual polls. There's not a ton of them, but we do have some new ones. Emerson College polled it. And we're looking at a low single-digit lead for Michelle Lujan Grisham. There's some other polls on here that show Grisham with much more of a lead. Trafalgar even has Mark Ronchetti ahead by 1 point. So I'm going out on a limb here and saying this is going to be truly competitive. Ronchetti is the underdog. Michelle Lujan Grisham should win this by 2 or 3 points, maybe even 4 or 5 if she has a good night at this point. But this one actually might be a little bit more competitive than it seems. If we go over to predict it and take a look at the market, Michelle Lujan Grisham does have a comfortable lead. She's at 76 cents. Ronchetti is at 28 cents. That's not insurmountable for Ronchetti, but all I'm saying is this race does have the potential for there to be an upset. Let's go on to number 4, and this for me is Nevada. Right now in the aggregate, Joe Lombardo is ahead anywhere from 0.8% to 2.3%. We can see on the graph here it's been very narrow, back and forth the past several months. And if we go down and take a look at the recent polls, most of them do narrowly favor Joe Lombardo, but there's a couple that do favor Steve Sisolak. For a long time, I thought Sisolak would be able to hold on to this seat, but over the past month, I think it does have the potential to flip. I'm only a little bit worried about Steve Sisolak's incumbency and undercounting of Democratic support. So for those reasons, I can see Steve Sisolak holding on by 1 or 2 for sure. But let's get on Predict It and take a look at that market. And this has Joe Lombardo at 79 cents. Steve Sisolak is down at 21 cents. To me, I think this market is a little bit too lopsided. I don't think it should really be beyond 60 cents for Joe Lombardo. This is making Steve Sisolak look like the underdog. And I do think this race is more competitive than this market and the polling suggests. Let's go on to number 3, and that is Kansas. Still not a whole lot of polling out of Kansas, but we did get one from Emerson the other day. And Laura Kelly does have a few points advantage. She's not at 50%. That's not necessarily a great sign for Derek Schmidt, the challenger. All year I've thought this race would be very competitive. I didn't think Republicans were just going to easily flip it because it's a red-leaning year. If Laura Kelly is able to hold on, I'm not going to be surprised. And at this point, it looks like she could actually hold on. The question is, are these third-party voters and undecideds going to end up coming back to Derek Schmidt? And is that going to be enough to put him over the top, or is Laura Kelly going to win a second term? If we take a look at the market for this race, Derek Schmidt, the Republican, he's at 56 cents. Laura Kelly, the Democrat, is at 45 cents. So this clearly indicates this could go either way. Schmidt probably has a very slight tilt margin advantage at this point, at least in the market. And I can understand that. Kansas is a fairly red state, and it's a red-leaning year. But Laura Kelly has presented herself as a moderate, and that might be enough to save her. Let's go on to number 2, and for me, that is Oregon. Right now, the polling shows Christine Drazan very narrowly ahead by anywhere from 1 to 2%, and this graph shows it's been very narrow all summer and all fall. If we go down and look at the individual polls, the more recent ones do show Christine Drazan with an advantage. She's still nowhere near 50% of the vote because Betsy Johnson, that third-party candidate, is still taking away some support. And I understand some of these are Republican-affiliated pollsters. Democrats are free to put out their own polls if they'd like. And there's a couple of them on here, but even Data for Progress shows Christine Drazan with a 1-point lead a couple of weeks ago. Betsy Johnson's support is dwindling here in the final couple of weeks. And given that she used to be a moderate Democrat, I could see a lot of them breaking toward Tina Kotek at the very end. But then again, all the issues for Oregon, homelessness, crime, and the economy, that could be enough for those voters to actually put Christine Drazan in the governor's mansion. This is one of the most exciting races I've seen, and on election day, it really could go either way. If we take a look at the predicted market, this has Christine Drazan at 59 cents, Tina Kotek is at 41 cents. Usually anything between 40 and 60 cents is essentially a coin flip, and this is no exception. Drazan having this edge in the market is probably indicative of her advantage in the polling we've seen, but it's a small enough advantage in a blue state to where Tina Kotek is definitely in this race still. But that takes us to my number one closest governor's election, and for me, that is Wisconsin. Right now, Tim Michels in the aggregate is ahead by around 1 point or less. This graph shows an extremely narrow race. It's been back and forth. But what about the individual polls? Well, most of the recent polls show Tim Michels with a very slight advantage, usually only 1 or 2 points. There was a poll from today from Spectrum News and Siena that showed Tony Evers ahead 2 points. That's not on here yet. And I understand some people might say they're underestimating Republican support given some prior polling errors. Yeah, it's possible. But I also don't think Tony Evers is hated enough to where they're going to vote for Tim Michels by 5 or 6 points. If he wins, I would think it would be about 1 point or so. But I'm not counting out Tony Evers. If he holds on narrowly, I'm not going to be surprised. But let's move over to Predicted and take a look at that market. This has Tim Michels at 67 cents. Tony Evers is at 36 cents. Slight advantage there for Michels. Really, you could change any of these top 4 and put them in a different order. This is what I settled on for my top 5. I understand some of you might be saying, well, where's Arizona? Personally, I think Kari Lake has got that much more comfortably than these other races. Others might ask, where's New York? Isn't that going to be close? It's definitely going to be closer than it used to be, but I just don't see it getting to the point where it's extremely competitive yet. And you might make an argument for Michigan being close. That's a possibility. There's a poll for Oklahoma governor today that showed Kevin Stitt with a 1-point lead. There's an outside chance of an upset there. I understand that. But this is the top 5 I settled on. You're free to make your own top 5 and let me know down below in the comments. And if you enjoy this channel, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next video.